Welcome to Breaking News to Trading Moves. So imagine spending like a decade and billions in capital trying to build a house, only to realize you can just buy the mansion next door for $10 billion in cash.
Right, which is, exactly what's happening right now in the biotechnology space.
Exactly. That is exactly what Vertex Pharmaceuticals is doing. We are looking at a very specific headline today. Vertex is buying Crinetics Pharmaceuticals in a roughly $10 billion deal.
Yeah, that 10 billion check is definitely catching a lot of attention in the market.
It really is.
Yeah.
So our mission for this conversation is pretty straightforward. We are going to walk you, the listener, through this specific headline. We want to examine the mechanics behind the transaction and then basically categorize the winners and losers in the market based on this specific action.
Yeah, and to set the table on the mechanics here, Vertex is making this acquisition to gain a larger position in rare endocrine diseases.
Right.
Specifically, Crinetics has been developing treatments for a condition called acromegaly. And for Vertex, a company historically known for dominating the cystic fibrosis treatment landscape, this provides a completely new growth path.
A totally new avenue for them. But let's pause on the disease itself, because to understand the value of this deal, you really have to understand the physical reality of the disease, right?
Oh, absolutely. So acromegaly is a rare hormonal disorder where the pituitary gland produces excess growth hormone.
The pituitary gland being that small organ at the base of the brain.
Exactly. It develops a non-cancerous tumor. And this tumor basically just constantly pumps out growth hormone, which then forces the liver to produce another hormone called IGF-1.
And that biological cascade is what leads to the abnormal physical changes in patients, right? I mean, the hands, feet, and facial features literally expanding over time.
Yeah, it is, but it goes far beyond just the visible features. That constant hormonal signaling causes internal organs to enlarge too.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, the heart muscles thicken, which leads to severe cardiovascular issues. The joints swell and degrade. It is a painful, life-altering condition for these patients.
That sounds incredibly severe.
It is, and the tragic part is patients often go years before receiving an accurate diagnosis because, well, the physical changes are so gradual.
Right. You might not notice it day to day.
Exactly. So by the time they are diagnosed, the internal damage is well underway, which requires highly specialized, targeted treatment. And Vertex sees immense value in bringing that specialized capability into their portfolio.
Okay, so let us start by looking at the most direct winner of this transaction before we zoom out to the broader market.
Makes sense.
The obvious winner here is Crinetics, ticker CRNX. They're the target of the acquisition. And owning the right target before a transaction yields upside because the buying company pays a premium over the current stock price to convince those shareholders to sell.
Yeah. The acquiring company is basically paying for certainty, or at least a much higher degree of certainty than you normally find in biotechnology.
Because developing a novel therapy from scratch is just a statistical nightmare, isn't it?
It really is. Most drugs fail. So when a buyer acquires a late-stage or approved rare disease asset, they are bypassing years of clinical failure risk.
Think about it like real estate. Paying the premium for a company like Crinetics, it's like buying a fully built, inspected house in a highly desirable neighborhood.
Right, you get the keys and you just move in.
Exactly, you just move in. The alternative, developing a drug from scratch, is like buying an empty lot. You might have a beautiful architectural drawing, but you still have to dig the foundation, hope you do not hit solid bedrock, apply for permits, and pray the city council actually approves your build.
Right.
Profitable drug makers want approved products and late-stage pipelines. They want the built house.
Your real estate analogy perfectly captures the clinical reality there. Those permits you mentioned, those are the 3 phases of FDA clinical trials.
Which are famously brutal.
Oh, absolutely. Phase 1 just proves the drug doesn't immediately harm healthy volunteers.
Right, just checking if it's toxic.
Exactly. Then Phase 2 tries to find the optimal dose while tracking early efficacy in a small patient pool. And then Phase 3 requires thousands of patients, massive capital outlays, and years of tracking to prove the drug actually works better than a placebo or the current standard of care.
Wow, so bypassing that entire decade-long gauntlet is exactly what Vertex is buying.
Precisely. But beyond just avoiding the clinical failure risk, these specific rare disease assets possess incredibly attractive commercial traits.
Like what?
Well, they offer strong pricing power because they address a high unmet medical demand where patients often have zero alternative options.
Let's examine that pricing power for a moment. Pharmaceutical companies can charge premium prices, but the sales infrastructure required to actually deliver the drug is entirely different from mass market medicines, right?
Oh, completely different. Consider a primary care drug, like a daily cholesterol pill.
Okay.
To sell that, a company needs thousands of sales representatives driving to every single general practitioner's office across the entire country.
Right, which is a massive overhead expense.
Exactly. But with a rare disease like acromegaly, the patient population is highly defined. And they're treated by a small, specific group of endocrinologists at major research hospitals.
So you don't need that army of sales reps.
Nope. A pharmaceutical company might only need a few dozen sales representatives to cover the entire national market.
Which means the cost of acquiring each customer is incredibly low compared to the price of the therapy. That focused sales need translates directly to better profit margins once the drug is actually commercialized.
Exactly. When you combine high pricing power with minimal commercial overhead, the resulting cash flow is highly attractive to a buyer with a large balance sheet.
So Crinetics, ticker CRNX, is the clear winner here. But, paying the premium for that fully built house means taking on a massive mortgage.
Right.
And that brings a whole new set of problems for the company writing the $10 billion check. Let's look at Vertex, ticker VRTX. Depending on your time horizon, Vertex sits in both the winner and loser categories.
Yeah, this is the classic acquirer's dilemma.
And here is where the market's logic often confuses retail investors. I actually want to push back on the prevailing narrative for a second.
Okay, go for it.
If Vertex is buying a proven asset that expands their growth, and they are acquiring a business with that highly profitable, focused sales model you just described, why would their stock face near-term pressure? Like, why do investors penalize the buyer when they announce a strategic acquisition that clearly benefits their product lineup?
It comes down to the math of the premium. That explains the initial drop. When a company pays $10 billion, they're usually paying a premium of 30 to 50% above the target company's current market valuation.
Right, to convince them to sell.
Exactly. And investors immediately become skeptical. The buyers must prove that deploying that capital creates long-term value that exceeds the exorbitant cost of the check they just wrote.
Because there is an opportunity cost to that capital, right? I mean, they could have used that $10 billion to buy back their own stock, issue a special dividend, or fund a dozen smaller internal research programs.
Furthermore, they have to consider the cost of capital itself. If interest rates are elevated, the hurdle rate for a positive return on invested capital becomes much higher.
That makes a lot of sense.
Investors penalize acquirers initially because the returns are completely uncertain. Writing the check is the easy part.
And then comes the hard part.
Right. Then you face the execution risk. You have to integrate the new company's culture, manufacture the complex biologic drug at a global scale, and actually hit the aggressive sales targets you promised Wall Street to justify the purchase price.
And mature biotech companies face intense pressure to buy growth when their older, established franchises begin to mature, right? Vertex has been remarkably successful with their cystic fibrosis portfolio. But investors always want to know where the next decade of revenue is coming from.
Yeah, that relentless demand for growth is the engine driving this entire sector. Cystic fibrosis treatments generate billions for Vertex, but they have largely saturated that patient population.
So they need a new pillar to support their valuation.
Exactly, and this dynamic is not unique to Vertex at all. The market will be watching other large-cap biotechs with passion to see who has the balance sheet and the strategic need to buy growth next.
Who should we be watching?
Well, investors will be monitoring companies like Gilead, ticker GILD, as well as Regeneron and Biogen, tickers REGN and BIIB, to see who moves next.
Because they are in the exact same position, essentially. They are mature, they generate massive amounts of cash from their legacy products, and investors are constantly evaluating their internal pipelines to see if they need to make a purchase of their own to secure future revenue.
Yeah, scarcity drives premium valuations in this market. Once one major player secures a scarce asset, the remaining players feel pressure to secure their own targets before the available inventory of completely built houses is depleted.
Which brings us to the broader sector winners. Now that we understand exactly why Vertex bought Crinetics, we could look at other companies possessing those exact same traits.
Right, because capital starts searching for the next potential target.
Exactly. So what are we looking at here?
We see attention turning toward rare disease candidates with defined patient populations and specialist markets. Companies like Ultragenyx, ticker RareR, and BridgeBio, ticker BBIO.
Okay, so Rare and BBIO.
Yes, these are companies building exactly the kind of late-stage de-risked assets we discussed earlier. They focus on severe genetic diseases where the patient populations are small, but the clinical benefit of the therapy is undeniable.
But it is not just about owning a specific rare disease drug, is it? You also have to look at specialty pharma and platform companies.
Oh, definitely.
Because these are the companies that possess the specialized commercial infrastructure required to actually deliver these therapies. Finding the patients in the first place is a major hurdle.
It really is.
I mean, you cannot just run a television commercial during a football game for a disease that affects 1 in a million people.
No, you can't. The logistics of rare disease commercialization are incredibly complex. You need specialized genetic screening programs, patient registries, and tight networks with the few doctors who actually diagnose these conditions. Companies that have built platforms to handle these logistics are incredibly valuable. Consider a company like Alnylam, ticker ALNY. They have extensive exposure to rare diseases through their RNA interference technology.
Let's examine that technology for a moment, because the biological mechanism is truly fascinating. How does RNA interference actually work in practice?
Okay, so traditional drugs usually target harmful proteins after they have already been produced by the body.
Okay.
RNA interference works differently. Think of human DNA as the master blueprint locked safely inside the nucleus of a cell.
Got it.
When the body needs to build a protein, it creates a temporary copy of that blueprint called messenger RNA, or mRNA.
Right, and it sends it out to the cellular machinery.
Exactly. So RNA interference acts as an interceptor. It destroys that temporary mRNA blueprint while it is in transit before the cellular construction workers can ever build the faulty, disease-causing protein.
Wow. That is a completely different paradigm. You are not treating the symptom. You are halting the cellular assembly line at the source code level.
Yeah, and that kind of platform technology is highly attractive to larger buyers.
What other types of platforms are attractive right now?
Then you have companies focused on the physical delivery mechanisms, like Halozyme, ticker ASLO. Their drug delivery technology can turn a lengthy, complex intravenous infusion into a quick injection under the skin.
Wait, how do they actually achieve that?
Yeah,
Because pushing a large volume of fluid under the skin usually causes intense pain and swelling, right? The human tissue just cannot absorb it fast enough.
Normally, yes, but Halozyme uses a specific enzyme that temporarily degrades a barrier in the subcutaneous tissue called hyaluronic acid.
Hyaluronic acid,
Yeah.
okay?
Think of hyaluronic acid like a dense structural matrix or like a thick gel that holds your skin cells together. The enzyme temporarily dissolves a small section of that gel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, creating open space for large volumes of fluid to be absorbed rapidly into the bloodstream. And then, within a day or two, the gel naturally rebuilds itself without any lasting damage.
Which completely changes the commercial viability of a rare disease drug. I mean, it turns a 3-hour hospital visit strapped to an IV pole into a 5-minute clinic injection.
Exactly.
That improves patient adherence and makes the drug far more appealing to insurers.
And speaking of insurers, that brings us to companies like Jazz Pharmaceuticals, ticker JAZZ. They have basically mastered the specialty pharma model.
They already have the plumbing installed for these specialized markets.
Yeah, they have the dedicated reimbursement teams that know exactly how to navigate complex insurance approvals for high-cost therapies.
Which is not easy to do.
Not at all. So a larger company looking to acquire a drug might look at a company like Jazz as a highly attractive target because the commercialization infrastructure is already battle-tested. The buyer does not have to build a specialized sales and reimbursement team from scratch.
Makes perfect sense. So, we have covered the traits that are being rewarded.
Yeah.
De-risked assets, late-stage pipelines, specialized commercial infrastructure, and platform technologies. Now we really need to transition to the sector losers. Because capital is rotating towards certainty, which means it is draining from somewhere else. Not every biotech stock benefits from this transaction.
No, a rising tide does not lift all boats in biotechnology. When large pharmaceutical companies signal they would rather pay a massive premium for a late-stage, de-risked asset, it suggests a broad aversion to taking on early-stage clinical risk.
So companies dependent on long clinical timelines are facing severe headwinds. The market is explicitly rewarding de-risked assets, not just promising early science.
Exactly.
If you are holding an early-stage speculative company, you are looking at years of clinical trials, massive cash burn, and the constant threat of regulatory setbacks.
Yeah, we are looking at companies like Beam Therapeutics, ticker Beam, Intellia, ticker NTLA, and Editas Medicine, ticker EDIT.
Right.
The science behind these companies is undeniably compelling. Many of them are working on advanced gene editing techniques using CRISPR technology to literally rewrite the genetic code and potentially cure diseases permanently.
Well, let me play devil's advocate here. If they can cure diseases permanently, I would argue that makes them the ultimate prize for a large pharmaceutical company.
You'd think so, right?
Yeah. Why wouldn't a company like Vertex just buy one of those gene editing startups and own the cure?
It comes down to the time value of money and the exorbitant clinical risk. From a trading and investment perspective, early-stage gene editing has a terrible near-term cash flow profile.
Because they're just spending cash, not making it.
Right. These early-stage companies are a decade away from generating meaningful commercial revenue. They must constantly issue new shares to raise the capital required to fund their research, which dilutes the existing shareholders.
That makes sense.
So when investors see Vertex writing a $10 billion check for a near-commercial asset, they follow suit. They rotate their own capital toward the de-risked end of the spectrum, leaving the early-stage speculative names without momentum or funding.
It is the empty lot versus the built house again. The market is basically saying, we do not want to fund your decade-long construction project right now. We just want to buy the finished property.
That is exactly it. And that covers the speculative side of the loser category. But there is another group of losers we must address.
Who's that?
The existing endocrine and specialty treatment competitors. Vertex now has extensive capital and a razor-sharp strategic focus directed at rare endocrine diseases like acromegaly.
They are entering the arena with an immense amount of firepower.
A tremendous amount of firepower. So if you are an established player generating revenue from older legacy treatments, this is a direct threat.
Right.
Companies like Pfizer, ticker PFE, Novo Nordisk, ticker NVO, and Amgen, ticker AMGM, are not pure acromegaly plays. They are massive diversified conglomerates. But they have exposure across endocrine, metabolic, or specialty care markets.
And if Vertex brings a new, easier-to-use therapy to market, those older approaches face immediate weaker demand.
In rare diseases, patient switching can happen rapidly.
Really? Just like that?
Yeah. If a patient is currently taking a painful intramuscular monthly injection formulated by an older competitor and Vertex commercializes an oral pill or a vastly less invasive option acquired from Crinetics, the market share will transition quickly.
Right, because why wouldn't they switch?
Exactly. Patients and doctors will aggressively advocate for the more convenient option. Those legacy revenues for the older competitors are suddenly at risk.
The switching costs are actually quite low for the patient once the new drug is approved and covered by insurance, because the quality of life improvement is just so dramatic.
Yeah.
The entrenched competitors cannot rely on brand loyalty when a superior physical delivery method enters the market.
Yeah, and the massive sales forces of companies like Pfizer and Amgen are built to push primary care blockbusters. They are often too slow and unspecialized to defend niche rare disease markets against a highly targeted superior product launch.
So, to summarize the trading takeaway for you, the listener, rare disease M&A is active, but the strategy is not simply buying every biotech stock you can find in an ETF. The strongest watch lists focus on companies with approved drugs, late-stage rare disease pipelines, specialist markets, and clear strategic value to larger buyers. You want the companies that have navigated the clinical minefield already and are sitting on a highly defensible commercial asset.
And before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Let's hear it.
We have established that large, cash-rich pharmaceutical companies are increasingly relying on acquiring de-risked, late-stage rare disease companies rather than developing these drugs in-house.
Right.
They are effectively outsourcing the early risk to smaller companies. But if that trend continues, what happens to the pipeline of early-stage medical innovation if funding eventually dries up for the startups taking all those initial clinical risks?
This is not financial advice or buy or sell recommendations. This is purely the opinion of the author.